Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Today I'm going to talk about reparations. A couple of days ago, I came across an article, and the article was about a Mississippi GOP Senate candidate who made statements about reparations. And here's what he said. And this candidate's name, first of all, is he's State Senator Chris McDaniel. And here's what he said. He said, if they pass reparations and my taxes go up, I ain't paying taxes. How are you going to make me pay for something I had nothing to do with? How you going to do that to me? Now that's his statement. And this statement is just a modern example, another example of GOP race baiting. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Southern strategy and the GOP's history of racism, I'm going to include a link to this video that includes statements from Lee Atwater where he's talking about the Southern strategy and how that works. But what you have here is another example of race baiting. The GOP is a party that's all about racism. It's a party that panders to the most racist elements in society. And that's why this guy made this statement, to pander to that racist element. There's no discussion about Congress passing some reparations law. There's no serious discussion going on about that. So the only reason why this man brought this up was to inflame racial animosity and to use that to push his campaign ahead. That's what you have here. And that's why he made this statement. But this statement really inspired me to talk about reparations. It inspired me to explain why I support reparations. Our ancestors didn't come here on the Mayflower. Our ancestors came to this country in slave ships. Our ancestors died during the Middle Passage. Millions of them died during the Middle Passage. Their bones rest at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. A debt is owed to our people, and we have to be the ones to collect that debt. For those who survived that horrific voyage, the Middle Passage, they experienced hell on earth. They were beaten, they were raped, they were brutalized, and they were killed at will. They were burned alive, they were castrated, they were subjected to the most inhumane treatment ever in human history. A debt is owed, and we have to be the ones to collect it. Our ancestors worked from sunup to sundown without compensation. A debt is owed, and we have to be the ones to collect it. Corporations were built off of the backs of our ancestors. Many corporations were built off of the back of our ancestors. And I'm going to show this article that I came across the other day that points out 15 companies or corporations that have benefited from the slave trade. And I'm sure that there are many more than these 15. I'm confident of that. But here are some of the companies that have benefited from slavery. They have reaped the financial benefits of our ancestors' suffering. You have companies like J.P. Morgan Chase, companies like New York Life, companies like Wachovia Bank, which is now owned by Wells Fargo. Companies like Rothschild and Sons Bank in London, Brooks Brothers, Barclays, Aetna, and USA Today are just to name a few companies that have benefited from the enslavement of our ancestors. Those companies have a debt that they have to pay. They are in debt to the black man and woman in America. Those companies were built off of the suffering of our people, off of the blood, sweat, and tears of our ancestors. Those companies probably would not be here today if it wasn't for the free labor that they got from our ancestors, the exploitation and oppression of our brothers and sisters, our ancestors. They are in debt to us. A debt is owed, and we have to be the ones to collect it. They benefit today off of the suffering of our ancestors. So they have to pay their debt. And they are way past due on that debt. Now, if you are 5 days past due on your credit card bill, they will call you. They will harass you at home and at work. We know this. And these bloodsuckers, these oppressors, they are way past due with what is owed to the African. They are 150 years past due on their debt, and we have to be the ones to collect it. We have to be the ones to collect it. Not only are corporations in debt to the African, to the black man and woman in America, the United States government is in debt to the black man. The United States used slave labor to build the White House. The United States government used slave labor to build the U.S. Capitol. The United States government not only used slaves, the United States government sanctioned slavery and made slavery possible. So the United States government is in debt to the black man. They are in debt to us. They have a debt, and we are here to collect that debt. Now, some will say, as that senator said, that they had nothing to do with slavery, that they shouldn't have to pay. They will say that the slaves are no longer amongst us and the slave masters are no longer with us. But the fact remains that the slave master's children are here. The slave master's children benefited from the slave master's thievery, oppression, and exploitation of the African. So the slave master's children have a debt that they need to pay over to the children of slaves. They have a debt that they have to pay. Those companies wouldn't be prosperous today if it wasn't for free slave labor. The United States government would not be what it is today if it wasn't for free black slave labor. In fact, Europe would not be what it is today if it wasn't for free black slave labor. A debt is owed, and we are the ones to collect that debt. Now, some will say that civil rights legislation is all we need. They will say that civil rights legislation is the remedy to the issue. But civil rights legislation is something that goes forward. It doesn't look backward. It doesn't compensate the people for their labor. It doesn't compensate the sons and daughters of slaves for all the money that has been reaped off of the backs of their ancestors. It doesn't compensate us for that. It is inadequate. It doesn't make us whole. It doesn't put us on a level playing field. You can't hold a people back for generations, for centuries, and expect them to compete on a level playing field. You can't expect them to compete. They have to be made whole from slavery. We were held back for centuries. And because they claim that the door is open, the door of opportunity is open, they actually expect us to compete in the race of life when they held us back all these centuries. We have to be made whole as a people. We need reparations. And we have to be the ones to collect those reparations. We have to be the ones to collect it. And some will say, well, what form should reparations take? Some will talk about just the payment. And some will say, well, there is no monetary amount that can be put on the suffering that our ancestors endured. And that is a valid point. I mean, it's valid because our ancestors endured so much that it is really hard to quantify what kind of compensation would be appropriate. But that is not a legitimate reason to deny reparations. A debt is owed to us, and we have to be the ones to collect it. Reparations should take the form of nation building. Reparations should be in the form of things that we need to sustain and create self-determination as a people. I don't think it should simply be a check. It should be something designed to empower us into the future and to create our true independence and self-sufficiency. And we could speculate, for a long time about what form reparations should take. But I think the first step should be passing H.R. 40. And that's the bill that John Conyers put forth years ago. A bill that no one will touch. None of these Democratic candidates will talk about it. They will dodge the issue. I mean, even a black president like Barack Obama won't embrace reparations. He won't embrace it. We need to ask every single candidate that comes before us for office, what is their position on H.R. 40? That needs to be one of the questions that we ask them. And we should vote for candidates based on their demonstrated commitment to that issue. Because a debt is owed and we have to be the ones to collect it. We have to be the ones to collect it. And I'll finish on this note. In order for slavery to justify its existence, to rationalize its brutality, it had to create a mythology. And that myth is the myth of white supremacy, the myth of black inferiority. It had to create racism to justify its existence. It had to create the lie that African Americans are inferior to white people and that white people are superior. That lie continues to exist today as a result of slavery. So slavery is not some ancient event that has no bearing on current conditions in society. It has everything to do with the current conditions of racism that continue to plague America. A debt is owed to the black man, and we are the ones that are going to collect that debt.